From the beginning of recorded human history, hundreds of millions of people have died in epidemics. There's, in the Bible, the Philistine plague. The Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant, put it in the temple of their god, and then the statue of their god fell down and the head fell off, and then the people in the area began to be struck with boils or a disease, and they would pass the Ark from one city to the next. Every city it went to, the people would catch this disease, and finally the Philistines said, let's get rid of it. They put it on a cart led by an oxen, and the oxen went back to Israel. There was the plague of Antonin. This was a plague that was brought back to the Roman Empire by troops that had been stationed in the Middle East. They estimate 5 million people died of this plague. 541 AD, there was a plague of Justinian. It killed an estimated 100 million people, half of the world's known population. Well, another is the Black Death, the bubonic plague, which began in 1334. And this is thought to have been brought back to Europe by rats. They estimate 75 million to even 200 million people died during the bubonic plague. When somebody contracted the bubonic plague, they would get rosy rings on their skin. They thought it was carried by the air, and so they thought if you breathed flowers that it would keep away the disease. The idea, if you had a pocket full of flowers, it would keep the plague away. When people died, they would burn them to ashes to make sure that it wouldn't spread. And so it turned into a nursery rhyme. Ashes, ashes, we all fall dead. In New England, thousands and thousands of people died in Boston, decimating the native population of the Indians, and they would have open graves. It was probably yellow fever or bubonic plague or influenza or smallpox or measles or chickenpox or typhus. 1890 to 1900, tuberculosis killed at least 100,000 people a year. 1918, the Spanish flu, 75 million people died worldwide. 1921, diphtheria, 200,000 cases a year, all the way through the 1920s. 1916 to 1955, polio. It peaked with 60,000 children infected in 1952, hundreds of thousands of paralytic cases worldwide. Even President Franklin D. Roosevelt had been crippled by the disease. In 1957, Asian flu, 2 million deaths worldwide. 1968, the Hong Kong flu, 1 million deaths worldwide. 1960 to the present, AIDS, 30 million deaths worldwide, particularly in Africa. Jewish populations had higher survival rates. They followed Mosaic instructions of washing hands, waste disposal, and then, of course, if someone caught a disease, the Jewish law said you isolate them for 40 days. The word 40 in Italian was quaranta, which gave birth to the term quarantine. The disease of the 19th century was cholera. Britain controlled India. India had some religious practices of bathing in the Ganges River that was filled with sewage. As a result, individuals contracted a waterborne disease of cholera. When the British East India Company built railroads across the country and sent steamboats up the rivers, infected individuals could quickly travel back to Europe, carrying cholera with them. Cholera was spread by drinking unsanitary water, though this was unknown at the time. It was the first truly global disease, killing tens of millions in crowded cities. In Russia alone, cholera killed over 1 million people, including Tchaikovsky. Immigrants infected with cholera brought it to America, Canada, Mexico, Venezuela, Brazil, and the Pacific coast. In 1832, Asiatic cholera outbreak gripped New York. By 1849, cholera killed 5,000 in New York with a mass grave on Randall's Island in the East River. 8,000 died of cholera in Cincinnati, Ohio. 3,000 in New Orleans. 5,000 killed of cholera in St. Louis, which was about 6% of the population. One of those died was Pierre Chateau Sr., one of the prominent citizens of St. Louis. Indian tribes were devastated. Chicago, 3,500 died of cholera. Harriet Beecher Stowe, her son died of cholera, as well as the former president, James K. Polk. Cholera deaths caused Ohio to postpone its first state fair. Cholera spread along the Oregon Trail to the Pacific Northwest, the Mormon Trail in Utah. It killed an estimated 12,000 on their way to the California gold rush. In total, about 150,000 Americans died of cholera. On July 3rd, 1849, President Zachary Taylor declared a national day of fasting. He said, at a season when the providence of God has manifested itself in the visitation of a fearful pestilence which is spreading itself throughout the land, it is fitting that a people whose reliance has ever been in His protection should humble themselves before His throne, and while acknowledging past transgressions, ask a continuance of divine mercy. Shortly after that declaration of fasting, the plague stopped.